Andreas Krieg is Associate Professor at the School of Security Studies at King's College in London. Joins us on set. Hopefully we'll unpick this piece by piece for our viewers. How much of the collapse of the Syrian regime is due to 13 years of civil war or this last week or so of Israeli bombardment that's been hitting military assets?
Well, it's a bit of both, really. I mean, what we have is a regime that has been extremely hollowed out. Their resilience was based around two strategic centres of gravity. On the one hand, it was Russian air power that really made a difference after 2015, and it remained a major element of being able to target these different infantry-based rebel groups. And the other centre of gravity, more important, I would say, is Iran and pro-Iranian militias and obviously Hezbollah. And so what Israel has done over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 months is gradually degrading Iran's capability, degrading Hezbollah's capability, causing Hezbollah to withdraw, and thereby leaving the regime forces of Assad completely exposed and unable, unwilling to fight, and also not really believing anymore that they can fight on their own. And so it's not really the strengths of HTS or the opposition. What we see is really a complete collapse of the front line. It was almost a drive from Aleppo all the way to Damascus. There wasn't any fierce resistance.
One assumes that the strength of HTS is built on perhaps the fact that they have been funded, got petrol, got vehicles, got armaments. Is that the case, or is it they actually only had this to start with? It's just the fact that the depletion of the Syrian regime has allowed them to move forward in this fashion?
That's right. So it's the strength of the opposition is very much the weakness of the regime, and the fact that it has been hollowed out. But I think what we see here is a very, very dynamic approach of mounted infantry, if you will, that is able to really rapidly advance, like what we call a kind of blitzkrieg, shock and awe kind of strategy, especially not just hitting physically, but the mental component of the regime, causing them to collapse. It's very similar to what we've seen with ISIS happening in Mosul in 2014, where they rapidly advanced. It's what we saw with the Taliban in 2021, when they rapidly advanced, very agile forces, taking a lot of territory in a very short amount of time against no resistance. What is interesting in all these cases is that there was the absence of air power. And I think that made a huge difference, the fact that the Russians were unable to target them on the ground and take them out.
Let's bring in the Russians, let's bring in the Iranians, let's bring in the Israelis here. All of them have been commenting. Iran saying we're watching the situation. Russia coming out with its foreign ministry statement saying they have talked to Bashar al-Assad. He's not in the country, according to them, and they are talking to the armed groups in Syria. Israel, in Syria, yes, and Israel warning off the armed groups, saying, don't come anywhere near our borders or we'll get you.
Well, it's a very messy situation. I think nobody anticipated the fall of the regime to come just that fast. So nobody really has a plan up in the drawer, despite the fact that we've been looking at this for 14 years. We should have come up with a plan. So the number one thing we have to consider now is socio-political power and authority being re-established across Syria, with all these different factions being represented, not just HTS. This is much broader than HTS. Secondly, I think depending on how this new authority is being established, the new government is going to be established, they will have to then negotiate with external powers. I think Iran is the one that will suffer the most, because their kind of supply chain going into Lebanon to Hezbollah has been severely undermined. I can't see how the opposition will make another deal with Iran after what Iran has done to support Assad. The Russians is a different story, I think, particularly if you want to bring in the Alawis in the northwest of the country, where the Russian base is. I could see the Russians striking a potential deal with the new Syrian government to kind of keep a foothold in it, if this is what they actually want. The great winner, obviously, is Turkey. They have now strategic depth. They have the relationships. They're going to be extremely relevant for any external power who want to negotiate with this new government. But I think this is primarily a Syrian effort run by Syrian forces who dominate and dictate the outcome of the Syrian revolution. And for the very first time, external powers are really on the sidelines looking on rather than actually meddling, and that's a positive development.
It's certainly a moving situation that we'll be getting more analysis from you in the hours ahead. For the moment, Andreas Krieg, thank you.
Thank you.